Alien defenders refused to fight. They saw what human commander did to the previous army. The alien defenders gazed out over the battered plains, their nerves fraying. The scorched debris of the last failed defense against human commandos was still smoldering beyond the battered ramparts of the Lysara stronghold on Vera, a fortress now pitted and stinking of burnt ozone and blood. The obsidian walls, once the pride of the Lysara pride, showed the wounds of acid burrowers and gene warheads, a testament to a siege that seemed endless. A human dropship descended through the haze, its hull streaked with scars, engines roaring as it settled among the tangled wreckage. The vessel touched down with a hiss, venting recycled air into the smoky, copper-tinged dusk. Even the wind seemed to recoil, swirling debris across the landing pad. Commander Marcus strode out first, his matte black armor absorbing the dim light, each step deliberate. The weight of countless battles clung to him, and the Lysara defenders, battered, bloodied yet unbowed, watched with suspicion sharpening their eyes. His presence was a living force, magnetic, shifting the center of gravity on the field. Behind him, 3 ghost squad mates emerged, their mirrored visors reflecting the twisted sky, their movements silent, precise. The Lysara bristled, instinct screaming at the arrival of this foreign, faceless strength. High Chieftain Mira stood on the edge of the pad, back straight in dented ceremonial armor that still managed to look regal. Her twilight blue fur stood on end, her great fox-like ears swiveling in agitation. Her golden eyes glowed, slitted and unblinking, never leaving Marcus as he approached. At her right, Lieutenant Rin, a massive figure, muscle and menace in equal measure, bared his fangs in a low, warning snarl. His claws flexed, scraping against his axe handle. Marcus halted a blade's width away from Mira, helmet sliding back with a mechanical sigh. His face was cut from stone, lips pressed in a thin line, eyes unreadable as obsidian. He inclined his head. "Chieftain Mira," he said, voice steady, carrying across the scorched ground. "The Assembly sends its regards," he added, the words carefully measured. Mira's muzzle curled. "The Assembly sends its arrogance," she replied, her tone like the snap of a broken blade. "4 humans to instruct us in war." Marcus's eyes flickered, but his voice remained a razor's edge. "To show you how to survive." Rin's hand twitched closer to his axe, hackles rising. The air between the 2 sides shimmered with tension, violence barely restrained. Inside the war room, the battered circle of Lysara tacticians glared from shadowed alcoves. The holomap's cold blue light flickered over tired faces, fangs bared in worry. Mira stood at the console, her claws dancing over the interface, drawing the lines of their defense as if willing them to hold. She gestured to the red markers swarming across the map, symbols for the oncoming Gorgle horde, each one a silent death sentence for her people. The blue counters, her proud Lysara warriors, formed a thinning line, outnumbered and nearly surrounded. "We meet them with honor," she insisted, voice ringing with conviction. "We hold the line with courage and steel." Marcus leaned over the display, fingers tapping casualty projections. "And you are dying," he replied, unflinching. "You fight as if this is a duel, not annihilation." A hush fell, broken only by the hum of the projectors. Rin snarled, slamming a fist onto the console so hard the glass shuddered. "We do not stoop to the ways of cowards." Marcus barely spared him a glance, his focus pinned on Mira. "The Gorgle are not an enemy, they are a storm. You don't challenge a storm with pride, you redirect it, you poison it, you break its path." He highlighted the flanking ravines, fingers tracing new lines on the map, his voice cold with certainty. "Lure the swarm here, collapse the overhangs, bury the heart of their force before it breaches the gates." Mira's tail lashed, her instincts flaring. She bristled, voice thick with distaste. My people do not cower in holes, she spat. Marcus stepped closer, his shadow falling across the holomap. Then you'll die in the open, he replied, words taut as wire. Their eyes locked, defiance sparking between them. A battle fought in silence, pride grappling with necessity. The war room's tension crackled, interrupted by an alarm shrieking through the base. Crimson warning lights strobed. On the screens, the Gorgle horde surged, pouring like liquid death through the very ravines Marcus had warned of. The Lysara line, stalwart and gleaming, met the swarm head-on. For a handful of heartbeats they held. Then, under sheer numbers, the line buckled, blue markers vanishing in waves of red. Mira's claws dug gouges in the console, her golden eyes burning with fury and humiliation. Your plan is failing, chieftain, Marcus said, voice flat as the gunmetal dusk outside. The room was silent but for the screams and static from the front. Marcus turned to her, command radiating from every muscle. Give me 100 of your warriors, he demanded. I'll seal the breach and break their flank. Rin bared his teeth, but Mira, pride ablade at her own throat, lifted her chin. Take your 100, she snapped. Their fate is on your head, human. Within minutes, Marcus and Ghost Squad led a vanguard of Lysara, tall, lean warriors whose expressions flickered between contempt and curiosity, into the shadowed gorge. The Lysara muttered under their breath, sneering at the humans' caution, their refusal to charge. Ghost Squad moved with uncanny precision, setting charges along the overhangs, the Lysara watching, confused, as one human sniper melted into a perch above. The first Gorgle vanguard thundered into the gorge, monstrous and mindless, teeth like broken glass. The Lysara braced for the clash, then the sniper's shot triggered a hidden gas pocket. Flame bloomed, the ravine sealing with a thunderous roar. The main horde, caught by surprise, surged, only to be buried alive as the charges detonated, bringing the world down upon them. Not a single Lysara blade was drawn. The survivors stared in silent disbelief, smoke and dust billowing around them, the horror of the Gorgle swallowed by stone and fire. Back in the war room, the 100 returned, no longer looking at Marcus with contempt, but with awe and the first glimmer of fear. Mira, shaken to her core, confronted him as the echoes of battle faded. Your trickery worked, she admitted, voice tight, pride and pain entwined. It was tactics. It was survival, Marcus replied, stepping into her space, the air between them charged. It was without honor, she hissed, jabbing his chest, eyes wild. What good is honor to the dead? He countered, his voice low. He lifted his hand, gently brushing her jaw, the touch soft but unyielding. For a moment, anger and confusion warred with something deeper, unspoken. Trust me, Marcus whispered, the promise trembling between them. Strategy and something more, poised on the knife's edge of a future neither could yet see. The following days were a dance of friction and uneasy partnership. Marcus and Mira moved like counterweights in a mechanism forced to turn. Late into the night, the war room pulsed with their presence, blue holograms painting their faces with the cold light of conflict. 1,000 strategies played out across the map, red and blue markers shifting under Marcus's steady hand and Mira's defiant glare. They argued about everything, about ambush points and honor, about the line between victory and annihilation. Marcus favored ruthless efficiency, his voice clipped as he outlined methods no Lysara would dream of. Salt the supplies left behind, he suggested one evening, tracing routes through the foothills. Lead the horde off with false scent trails. Let them hunt ghosts, not warriors. Mira's tail lashed, her tone edged with stubborn pride. We are not scavengers. My people are not expendable pieces for your assembly's board. Marcus didn't flinch. There's only the mission, he said, eyes locked on the map, finger moving along a jagged path that skirted their forward emplacements. She reached out, placing her hand over his, claws sheathed but her grip fierce. Our honor is our soul. Without it, we are nothing. I will not lead my people into shame, no matter the cost. He paused, turning his hand beneath hers. Their fingers tangled, a moment so intimate it seemed to break the rules of war. His voice softened, though steel remained in his words. To beat the horde, you must adapt. Sometimes you must be the storm. They lingered there, locked in a silence more meaningful than any argument. In those breathless pauses between conflict, their bond deepened, forged by necessity and tempered by a growing respect neither had expected. The war room became their crucible, their conversations drifting from tactics to philosophy, from pride to sacrifice. Arguments became debates, debates became collaboration, and through it all, trust began to grow. Hesitant, but real. But the world beyond those blue-lit hours was never safe, their fragile routine shattered without warning. On the third night, as they mapped Gorgle patrols, the war room's door exploded inward. Acid hissed as it ate through the metal threshold, and 3 Gorgle stalkers, sleek, predatory, bone-white, burst inside, their claws gleaming, mandibles snapping. Marcus's instincts snapped into place. He moved before Mira could react, shoving her behind the console just as a spray of acid vaporized the space she'd stood. He ducked, drew a cable from his belt, and whipped it around the first stalker's throat, yanking it backwards. It writhed, screaming, but he twisted until it fell limp. The second lunged. Marcus caught it with a flash of his blade, severing its limb, then finishing it with a precise stab under the carapace. The third beast leapt over the console, claws outstretched for Mira. Marcus hurled himself in the way, taking the brunt of the attack. His armor sizzled, a rent torn across the chest plate, blood welling beneath. He finished the beast with a cold efficiency that bordered on terrifying. In seconds, the room was silent but for the crackling of melting metal and the hiss of Marcus's breathing. Mira rose, wide-eyed, staring at the blood seeping through his suit. In that moment, she saw him as something more than human. Violence incarnate, perfectly contained, a force of nature in the shape of a man. She reached for him, but he waved her off, tearing away a strip of his undersuit to staunch the wound. For a heartbeat, the space between them was charged. Fear, awe, and the awareness that the divide between them had grown thinner and more dangerous. An alert blared, cutting through the tension. The lights pulsed, red warnings scrolling across every surface. A seismic warning. Something immense was approaching the base. The ground itself trembled, dust dancing in the stale air. Mira's captains raced into the war room, fur bristling, weapons drawn. Marcus staggered to the map, blood dripping from his side, and pulled up fresh schematics. The Helian behemoth, he said, voice rough, bioengineered, 9 feet tall, armor-plated, claws like swords. The holomap flickered, showing a nightmare silhouette, a monster of muscle and malice, eyes cold and calculating. Mira stiffened, rallying her captains for a last stand. "We hold the line," she declared, summoning all the authority she possessed. "We fight together, or we die together." But Marcus saw something else. He scanned the map, highlighting a web of tunnels beneath the surface. "It's a distraction," he muttered, tracing the lines. "The real threat is below, the brood minds, the matriarchs that control the horde. They're telepathic. Cut them off, and the swarm dies with them." Mira's fur bristled, ears flattening. "You want to divide our strength while a monster pounds at our gates?" He met her gaze, unblinking. "If we don't strike at their heart, the beast is just the beginning. We'll drown in Gorgle." A new tension threaded the air. Doubt, suspicion, and the shadow of betrayal. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he regarded the assembly's envoy, Darion, who lingered at the edge of the room, gaze averted. Marcus spoke low, so only Mira could hear. Darion. He's fed information to the enemy. I've seen the pattern, movements, traps set for my team. There's a leak. Mira bristled, pride warring with logic. He is assembly. You have no proof. Then we test him, Marcus replied. He outlined a plan. Feed Darion false battle plans. See if the Gorgle responded. Mira hesitated, but curiosity and the glimmer of trust won out. She sent the message herself, voice taut. If you are wrong, Commander, it is your head I will claim. Within hours, the enemy shifted. Gorgle forces realigned precisely as the false plans dictated. The proof was undeniable. Darion's betrayal was laid bare. Mira's faith in Marcus, hard-won, became absolute in that moment. She watched him in a new light, admiration flickering beneath her battle-hardened exterior. The assault began at dusk. Mira mustered her warriors atop the battered ramparts, the Helian behemoth thundering closer, each step shaking the fortress. Meanwhile, Marcus and Ghost Squad slipped into the underworld, armor painted to blend with the shadows, weapons silenced, movements ghost-like. Mira monitored their helmet feeds, transfixed. It was not war as she knew it, but art. Ghost Squad moved through the tunnels with terrifying grace, manipulating scents to mislead the Hive's guardians, setting charges to trigger cave-ins, and releasing Lissaran bioweapons long forbidden, spores that drove the Gorgle mad, sap that corroded their carapaces. Every maneuver was precise, predatory cunning honed to a razor's edge. For the first time, Mira saw that survival could be beautiful, even if it was born of darkness. The feed shuddered as Ghost Squad reached the brood chamber. Marcus moved with unerring purpose, sliding between the elite Gorgle guards, neural agent in hand. He triggered the device, a pulse of invisible energy. The guards froze, then turned on the brood minds with a sudden frenzied violence. The chamber became chaos, the air thick with psychic howls. Marcus advanced, eyes cold, and executed the last matriarch with a single, clinical shot. Above, on the plains, the Helion behemoth faltered, then collapsed in a heap, its body unraveling as the hive mind died. The remaining Gorgle scattered, leaderless and lost. The Lissara roared in triumph and disbelief. The war was over. The Lissara survived. Mira's warriors clustered in exhausted celebration, but she stood apart, watching the blood-streaked human who had changed the fate of her people. It was a victory, but it tasted bittersweet. Her honor had saved her people, but it had also been remade by necessity, tempered by a new kind of respect for the enemy who had become her ally. And as the smoke of battle faded, Mira wondered if her heart, too, would ever be the same. The stronghold was quieter than it had been in memory. The winds that once howled through shattered corridors now carried only the faint sense of smoke and ozone, fading with each passing hour. In the aftermath of annihilation, a hush fell, part reverence, part disbelief. Throughout the battered fortress, Lissara warriors spoke in awed, nervous whispers about the 4 humans who had come from the assembly, about the ones they now called the Architects. Ghost Squad, once objects of suspicion and contempt, had become legends overnight. Mira moved through the silent halls, her stride slower, her thoughts heavier. Pride was a strange thing. She felt its weight in her chest, its ache in her limbs. She passed warriors who averted their eyes, some in shame, some in gratitude, and she realized her world had been remade by the hands of outsiders. Still, one figure lingered in her mind. Marcus, the man who had rewritten the rules of survival and, in doing so, had unsettled the very foundation of who she was. She found him in the armory, a sanctum now emptied of the usual clatter and camaraderie. Marcus sat on a bench, stripped to a black undersuit, his armor pieces scattered around him like relics of a forgotten war. He moved with surgical precision, cleaning his rifle with the same cold focus he brought to every battle. His face was a mask, unreadable, stormy, intent. Mira paused at the threshold, watching him for a long moment. The balance between them had shifted, irrevocably altered by fire and blood. She had seen the monster lurking beneath his skin, the violence he wielded with such terrible grace, yet instead of recoiling, she found herself drawn, fascinated, even comforted by the darkness that mirrored her own. She cleared her throat, voice steady. "The behemoth is dead," she announced, the words echoing in the empty space. Marcus didn't look up. "I saw," he replied, not missing a stroke as he ran a cloth along the barrel. "My pride owes you everything," she said, pride and vulnerability lacing her words. He set the rifle down, finally meeting her gaze. His eyes were a storm, shadows roiling beneath a surface of ice. "Your people live. That's all that matters." She stepped closer, each movement deliberate, closing the distance between them until only a hand's breadth remained. "Look at me, Marcus," she demanded, her voice low, the command as much for herself as for him. He looked up, and in that moment the tension shattered. The arguments, the battles, the doubts, all dissolved, leaving only need and recognition. Her restraint snapped. In a single predatory motion, Mira shoved him back against the weapons rack. He let her, back hitting the metal with a satisfying clang, but his hands were anything but passive. They found her waist, strong fingers digging into the soft fur at her hips, holding her as if anchoring himself to something real for the first time. "You're not a soldier," she growled, breath hot against his jaw. "You're a monster." He smiled, a wolfish, knowing twist of the lips. "We become what we must to survive, chieftain," he whispered, voice rasping with hunger. In a blur, he reversed their positions, spinning her so her back pressed to the cold steel. Now his control was absolute, his body a cage, his lips brushing the tip of her ear. "And you have no idea what I want right now." She yielded, fierce and trembling, letting herself be consumed. Their passion ignited in the shadows, a collision of power and longing, both of them desperate to lose themselves in each other, to rewrite the world for just a moment. Their bodies found a rhythm that was at once a battle and a surrender, a language older than war. But the universe, as always, cared nothing for stolen moments. The door hissed open, metallic and shrill. Mira pulled away, fur bristling, as Envoy Darien strode into the armory, two security bots flanking him like shadows cast by guilt. Darien's face was a mask of bureaucratic self-importance, but his eyes gleamed with triumph. He brandished a datapad like a weapon. "Mira, Commander Marcus, I have orders from the Assembly." His voice was oily, every word sharpened to wound. Marcus's expression hardened, but he said nothing. Darien continued, voice rising for all to hear. "The Assembly has reviewed footage from the Hive assault. Evidence shows Ghost Squad unleashed a retrovirus in the tunnels, one designed to eradicate all Lysara after they dealt with the Gorgle threat. The Assembly has declared Marcus and his team criminals. There is a bounty for their capture, dead or alive." The words hit the armory like a grenade. In the corridor beyond, Lysara captains gathered, drawn by the commotion. Murmurs turned to angry growls, hackles rising, eyes narrowing with outrage. Mira's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her face a mask, even as her claws curled with fury. She stepped forward, placing herself between Marcus and the mob. "You accuse my allies with doctored evidence and assembly lies?" Her voice was cold, imperious. "I demand a review of all footage. We will see every second from Ghost Squad's unedited helmet feeds." Darien faltered, his confidence slipping, but he had no choice. The feeds were retrieved, projected on the armory's far wall, blue-tinged, flickering images that stripped away the assembly's narrative. The captains watched in heavy silence as Ghost Squad's methods were laid bare. No retrovirus, no indiscriminate plague, only ruthless efficiency, careful manipulation, and the ancient Lissaran bioweapons, tools of war, not genocide. When the footage ended, the mood had shifted. Anger dissolved into horror, outrage into a deep, wounded silence. The Lysara captains looked at Marcus not with hatred, but with the dawning realization that the line between survival and annihilation was thinner than they'd ever known. Rin, the great lieutenant, stepped forward, his voice shaking with rage and sorrow. "That is not war. That is extermination. We are not vermin." The words rang out, final and irrevocable. The captains, united for the first time, refused the Assembly's contract. They would not be the Assembly's executioners, not after what they'd seen. Their will was broken, but their pride, paradoxically, was intact, reforged by the knowledge that they had chosen mercy over vengeance. Mira's eyes burned with righteous fury as she turned to Darien. "You will answer for this betrayal," she pronounced. "Guards, arrest the envoy. Charge him with treason against the Lysara and the Assembly." Security bots hesitated, caught between conflicting protocols. But the Lysara captains surged forward, their resolve overwhelming any hesitation. Darien struggled, shouted, but was dragged away, his datapad clattering to the floor. In that moment, the Lysara's mercenary pride had defied the Assembly's will. The legend of the architects, and of a chieftain who had chosen alliance over annihilation, spread from that stronghold to the stars. Humanity's reputation was changed forever, not by their might, but by the line they refused to cross, and the fragile, fierce bond forged in the crucible of survival. Marcus and Mira stood side by side on the command deck of her flagship, Night's Edge, the wounded blue orb of Vera spinning quietly beneath them. The war was over, at least in blood and gunfire, but in its wake, a deeper, colder conflict rippled across the stars. The mercenary guilds of the Rim twitched with uncertainty, their old certainties shattered by what had unfolded on that battered planet. Mira's gaze lingered on the holo displays. Guild sigils flickered with new alliances and panicked communications, news feeds crawling with speculation. "The guilds are in turmoil," she observed, her voice low and thoughtful. "Every pride that ever considered crossing humanity is reconsidering." Beside her, Marcus watched the shifting patterns of power with the same cold focus he had once brought to the battlefield. He stood close, the space between them charged not just with command, but with a private intimacy, the kind born of fire and shared secrets. "Fear is more reliable than gold," he replied, his tone wry, but his eyes never left hers. Mira turned, searching his face for something deeper, something that lived behind the mask of the Assembly's deadliest weapon. "Is that what you want, Marcus? Fear?" He shook his head, almost imperceptibly, and for a moment the steel in his eyes softened. "Respect," he said quietly. "Fear is just a means." She studied him, the lines of his face, the scars that told stories she would never fully know. He reached up, tracing her jaw with his fingers, the touch gentle, almost reverent. "You've shown me that victory without honor is empty," he murmured. A soft rumble of contentment vibrated in Mira's chest. She leaned into his hand, her own claws sheathed as she caught his fingers in hers. "And you've shown me that honor without victory is death." They stood together, not as conqueror and conquered, but as equals forged in fire. The galaxy spun beyond the viewports, indifferent and infinite. But for a moment, their alliance was the center of it. A pact of blood, cunning, and hard-won trust. He bent and kissed her, a brief but fierce promise, of future battles, of shared burdens, of something neither of them dared name. 6 months later, the galaxy still reeled from the aftershocks of Vera. At the Grand Assembly on Meridian Station, a place where power wore 1,000 masks, Mira and Marcus entered as a unit. The vast amphitheater's crystalline walls shimmered with the light of 100 worlds. Senators, syndicate lords, and guildmasters turned as one, conversations dying as the Lysara Queen strode through the crowd with the human shadow at her side. Rin, now grizzled, his silver mane streaked with new scars and hard-won wisdom, rumbled at the stairs and whispered rumors. "They see a queen with a shadow at her side," Mira murmured, a trace of amusement curling her lips. Marcus's presence radiated quiet menace, his movements precise, controlled, each gesture a silent warning to those who might test the new alliance. Even the most powerful syndicate leaders avoided his gaze, unwilling to risk what they had seen unleashed. Their partnership had evolved. The long nights once spent over holomaps and battle projections now revolved around the machinery of politics, trade agreements, non-aggression pacts, the slow, delicate work of uniting old enemies. They dissected the Assembly's labyrinthine laws with the same intensity they once reserved for battle plans, each argument a contest of wits, each compromise a new front in their ongoing war for the future. In the sanctuary of their private suite, the pretense fell away. Mira gazed out at the nebula beyond the viewport, the colors shifting from indigo to gold as Meridian Station rotated. Marcus came up behind her, arms circling her waist, his chin settling on her shoulder. "You command a room as well as a battlefield," he murmured, his breath warm against her fur. She purred, low and contented, turning in his arms. "You taught me intimidation," she teased, eyes glinting with mischief. He laughed softly, his hands tracing slow patterns down her hips, mouth grazing her neck. "I can still teach you a few things about negotiation," he whispered, his voice rough with affection. She let him unclasp her armor piece by piece, surrendering in a way she never had before, to him, to herself, to the possibility of something beyond victory or pride. Their intimacy had become its own negotiation, equal parts tenderness and ferocity, a dance in which neither truly yielded, but both gave all. They moved together to the bed, the lights of the nebula painting them in shifting colors. His hands moved over her, strong yet gentle, and she arched into his touch, her own hands just as searching, just as possessive. They found in each other a balance neither had ever known, a peace that was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of trust. Afterwards, wrapped in the hush that only follows storm and surrender, Mira lay against him, fingers tracing the scars on his chest. "The Assembly will never accept us," she said softly, her words more observation than fear. Marcus kissed her brow, one arm tight around her. "Let them try to stop us," he said. "We built a future on a battlefield. We'll hold it against anything." She smiled, eyes closing as she listened to the steady thrum of his heart, feeling for the first time in her life that honor and survival could coexist, that love, like war, was a question of will. And as the galaxy spun on, indifferent to the wounds and alliances of mortals, Marcus and Mira stood together at the edge of a new world, her honor, his cunning, an alliance forged in fire and sealed in desire. In each other, they had found not just a partner, but a future, one worth fighting for. The assassination attempt came quietly, like a whisper in a room full of laughter. The grand dining hall of Meridian Station glittered with crystal and shifting nebula light, the air thick with the scent of rare flowers and politics. Mira was a vision in silver silks, her fur brushed until it shimmered, gold-threaded cuffs gleaming at her wrists. She moved among dignitaries like a queen in her element, every word and glance a calculated move. Marcus lingered at the edge of the crowd, eyes never still, his presence a silent threat wrapped in tailored black. Tonight was meant to be a celebration. New alliances, old grievances buried beneath toasts and formal bows. Mira's pride moved with her, arrayed in ceremonial armor beneath their finery, while Marcus watched the room with a predator's patience. He saw the little things others missed, the tension in a bodyguard's jaw, the way a server gripped his tray, the flickers of calculation behind two smooth smiles. A Varn diplomat approached, cloaked in violet, eyes like polished obsidian. He bowed, extending a data crystal in a gesture of fealty, the motion so smooth it might have been rehearsed 100 times. But Marcus caught the microsecond of hesitation, the flicker in the diplomat's gaze as it slid past Mira's shoulder. He stepped forward, intercepting the gift with a casualness that belied his vigilance. The room barely noticed, but Mira's ears flicked in warning. Marcus turned the crystal over in his palm, thumb brushing a hidden seam. His gaze sharpened. "A logic bomb," he announced, voice cutting through the conversation like a blade of ice. The diplomat's eyes widened, mask slipping. He lunged for Mira, a slender blade flashing from his sleeve, the metal gleaming with the sickly green of poison. Mira moved with feline grace, sidestepping the attack and grabbing the diplomat's wrist in a blur, twisting until bones snapped. He screamed, dropping the blade. Marcus was already in motion, catching the would-be assassin by the throat and delivering a nerve strike that dropped him to the floor, convulsing. In an instant, Ghost Squad surged from the shadows, securing the scene before panic could ripple through the gathering. Mira met Marcus's gaze across the chaos, her eyes blazing with cold fury. The threat was over, but the implications were only beginning to bloom. Later, in the sanctuary of their suite, the adrenaline still humming in their veins, they pieced together the plot. The data crystal was assembly-grade tech, not the kind peddled on black markets. Layers of encryption and a false diplomatic seal pointed to a level of sophistication and access that ordinary mercenaries couldn't dream of. The blade's poison was rare, synthesized on a world controlled by Darian's loyalists. Mira sat at her console, armor half donned, fingers flying over the controls. "This was not just a message," she said, frustration sharpening her words. "It was a declaration of intent." Marcus examined the recovered data, his expression grim. "Darian's faction. And this," he said, holding up a fresh alert, "confirms a second team, targeting the transport hub." Mira's jaw tightened. "They want to make this look like an internal feud. Discredit the Lysara, destabilize the new alliance. It's classic assembly sabotage." "They didn't expect you," Mira added, eyes flashing as she locked her armor into place. "They never do," Marcus replied, already slicing through station security protocols, fingers dancing over the hollow surface. Encrypted messages unfurled on the screen, assembly ciphers cross-referenced with corporate signatures, payouts, and kill orders. Together, they followed the digital breadcrumbs to the transport hub, a labyrinthine sector pulsing with travelers, cargo drones, and guild operatives. But tonight, Mira and Marcus moved as predators, not prey. Every sense was sharp, every instinct honed. Mira strode toward the checkpoint, flanked by two loyal captains, head high, eyes daring anyone to block her path. In the shadows, three figures shifted. Assassins in disguise, weapons hidden beneath civilian garb. Above, in the iron lattice of the ceiling, Marcus spotted the glint of a rifle scope, the telltale shimmer of active camo. He ghosted through the upper gantries, silent as a breath. "Three at the checkpoint, two above," he murmured into Mira's calm. She smiled without humor. "I'll draw them out." The assassins closed in, emboldened by their numbers and the cover of chaos. But before they could make their move, Marcus acted. His pistol whispered twice. Two snipers crumpled, dead before they hit the ground. He dropped into the melee below, a shadow in motion. "Lights out," Marcus ordered, voice low and final. The hub plunged into darkness, panic erupting as civilians scattered. In the black, Mira was a storm. She dropped the first assassin with a spinning kick, breaking his jaw. The second came at her with a shock blade. She caught his arm, driving her elbow into his throat. The third hesitated, but not for long. She slammed him into a pillar, claws at his throat. Elsewhere, Ghost Squad moved with surgical precision, disabling the remaining attackers, pulling weapons and comms from their limp hands. When the lights snapped back on, the assassins were ringed by armed Lysara, face down and groaning. Security flooded in, confusion morphing into awe as the true shape of the night's events emerged. The captured conspirators broke under questioning, implicating not just Darian's faction, but a nest of assembly and corporate interests, names with the power to start or end wars. Mira and Marcus stood over the defeated assassins, a new kind of power humming between them. They had uncovered something more potent than any gun or bomb: leverage. Back in their suite, adrenaline still singing beneath her skin, Mira traced the hard line of Marcus's jaw, her claws gentle. "They won't make that mistake again," she said, voice velvet over steel. "No," he agreed, his hand closing over hers, warmth flickering in his eyes. "Next time, they'll be smarter. It won't matter." She pulled him close, armor clinking against his chest, her eyes fierce. "We are a power now. Not just a pride, not just a squad. Something more." She searched his face, finding the same hunger and certainty she felt. "You have a new contract, Commander. Unconditional." He smiled, truly smiled for the first time since Vera, his eyes reflecting her resolve. "And the terms? My pride, my fleet, my life. And you, Marcus, will be my architect. I will be your chieftain." He drew her into his arms and sealed the pact with a kiss, deep, hungry, a treaty of passion and ambition. The past had forged them in war. The future would belong to them, together. The assembly ended, but the consequences rippled outward in waves that reshaped the galaxy. The Lysara, once mercenaries, proud but scattered, became something else entirely. No longer hired blades, they were a power in their own right, their alliance with humanity the new axis around which old empires trembled. Where there had been chaos, there was now order, an order that unsettled every regime clinging to the memory of past dominion. Mira and Marcus stood at the heart of this transformation, a united front on the assembly floor and beyond. Every step they took together was a challenge, a promise, a threat. Delegates watched them move through the halls of Meridian Station with equal parts fear and fascination, as if waiting to see whether the galaxy would ignite or be reforged in their wake. The old ways, built on wary contracts and grudging respect, crumbled in the shadow of their alliance. Rin, once the brash lieutenant, now tempered by battle and betrayal, stood guard behind them. His mane was streaked with silver, his eyes sharper, his loyalty unshakable. He watched the shifting tides of power with the same careful attention he once reserved for the battlefield. If any dared approach too close, a single growl from Rin was enough to remind them that the Lysara were no longer for hire. They were to be reckoned with. In the privacy of their quarters, far from the curious eyes of senators and spies, Mira and Marcus discovered a new language. It was not the clipped speech of strategy or the curt barbs of command, but something softer, deeper. Here, Mira shed her armor, letting the weight of centuries slip from her shoulders. She let Marcus see the woman beneath the chieftain, the uncertainty, the scars, the laughter she hid from the world. He, in turn, let go of his iron discipline. The cold, precise commander set aside his mask, showing her the vulnerability that few had ever witnessed. The memories that haunted him, the hope he scarcely dared name, the raw longing that no armor could hide. In these moments, they became something more than allies, more than lovers. They were equals, partners, a fusion of wild honor and calculated brilliance. Their partnership became legend almost overnight. Mira, the queen in twilight silks, and Marcus, her silent architect, whispers of their exploits traveled faster than any ship. Some called them a queen and her shadow. Others, the chieftain and the architect. Together, they debated as fiercely as they strategized, voices raised in challenge, laughter, and sometimes in shared exhaustion as the galaxy demanded more of them each day. Yet their fire was not reserved for war rooms alone. In the hush of their suite, passion burned as fiercely as ambition. Trust became a living thing, earned, not assumed. Mira let Marcus touch the places she guarded most jealously, his hands gentle on old wounds. Marcus allowed her to draw him out of himself, to show him that strength could mean surrender, that love could be an act of courage greater than any battle. The galaxy watched, wary and uncertain. In council chambers and underworld dens alike, old alliances broke, new ones formed, and every move Marcus and Mira made sent ripples through the great game. Their enemies, many and resourceful, tested the new order with 1,000 provocations. Some were overt, others subtle as a whispered threat. The next threat came quietly, as the most dangerous ones always did. There was no grand announcement, no open challenge, just a slow tightening of the air, the feeling of eyes watching from the shadows. Another assassination attempt, this one woven through layers of plausible deniability, a poisoned courier, a falsified communique, a series of accidents in the diplomatic wing. Where once they might have moved separately, Mira leading her pride, Marcus vanishing into the dark, now they acted as one. Marcus was the first to sense it, a pattern in the background noise. "We're being tested," he told Mira, voice quiet but certain. "They want to see if the alliance is more than a show." Mira's eyes narrowed, gold burning in the half-light. "Then let them learn the hard way." She donned her armor, the plates fitting her with the ease of ritual, and together they prepared, not as hunted, but as hunters. They set their own trap, feeding rumors to the right ears, leaving just enough of a gap in their security for the assassins to take the bait. When the strike came, a flash of toxin, the flicker of a concealed blade, Mira met it with brutal elegance. Marcus neutralized the handler before the alarm finished sounding. The rest of the attackers folded under Ghost Squad's efficiency, confessions spilling out faster than blood. When the smoke cleared, the message was unmistakable. To attack one was to face both, and together they were indomitable. Even the most entrenched powers of the Assembly hesitated, reassessing their place in the new order. In the aftermath, the galaxy's balance shifted. Some regimes sought alliance, others faded into irrelevance. The mercenary guilds fractured, with half pledging loyalty to the Lysara, the other half scattering to the dark corners of space. Trade routes shifted, old boundaries dissolved, and through it all, Mira and Marcus stood as the axis of a world remade. On the eve of their next campaign, a campaign to bring order to the border worlds, to heal what war had shattered, Mira stood before Marcus, fire in her eyes and resolve in every line of her body. The stars wheeled above, uncaring, but the fate of worlds hung between them. "Together, we will show this galaxy the true meaning of strength," Mira said, voice low, each word ringing with conviction. Marcus took her hand, pressing it to his heart, his eyes never leaving hers. "And together, we will teach them what it means to yield." Their kiss was no longer a truce, but a coronation, a vow and a victory in one. In that moment, it was clear. This was the beginning of a new order, born of Lysara honor and the beautiful, terrifying cunning of a human mind. The galaxy would never be the same. Our story ends here. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.